It's his brain. It'll get me into bed every time. I always say the man's brain is his most attractive organ.
As long as it's not too inflated, obviously.
Well, obviously it doesn't appeal the same one. The same organ doesn't appeal to everybody, does it, Nicola?
No, it's jolly good job it doesn't. Anyway, no, I never thought we'd be having this conversation on the podcast.
Welcome to Own It, Your Business and Your Life, with Nicola Cairncross and Judith Morgan. In this podcast, we're going to cover everything you need to embrace to become a successful entrepreneur, marketing, money, and much, much more. How to create a business doing just what you love. How to own it, your business and your life. This one will be fast, funny, feisty, and very lively. So sit back and enjoy the show.
Morning, madam.
Morning, love.
How are you?
All right, how are you?
Well, it's just started raining in Greece, so I'm a bit disappointed.
It's been raining all night here. It's only drizzling now, but I was in and out of sleep or dreaming last night, and my memory of last night is all I could hear was rain outside the window.
Yeah, it's been stormy and sunny, but now it's started raining, so I'm hopefully it'll improve. I was swimming on the 5th of November, which isn't too mean a feat.
You were what? Swimming? Yes, very good. We are cold and wet now, but not stormy, interestingly, just sort of rather dreary.
Yes, well, the sad thing, of course, is that our internet, we have to turn it off when there's storms and lightning and thunder, and it's not good.
Well, I think it's probably rather good for you too.
Yeah, well, possibly. Yes, it does force you to do other things, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So part of my week is the fact that I'm realising I'm here now, and it's taken, we're in the 4th week now, or if not the 5th, 4th week, and I'm starting to realise that I'm actually here, and I'm starting to feel the effects of not doing it, well, trying not to do anything, which is a weird feeling.
Okay.
I'm not doing anything because, obviously me, Edgar's doing a lot of my social media. The podcast is creating content, and, it's not like I'm not doing anything at all, but because I'm not physically doing it myself, I feel like I'm not doing anything.
Okay.
Which is very odd.
I think that's probably prompted your challenge of the week heads up you gave me, hasn't it then?
No, that's not a personal one per se. That just popped into my head.
Okay.
Yeah, but so we faced our worst fear. We had the biggest spider on the planet marching along the back of our sofa the other night.
Right.
And I noticed, I mean, it makes you feel hysterical just thinking about it, really, because they're so bold, these creatures, aren't they? They just come marching along like they don't give a monkeys.
Can I ask, there's something that's confusing me about this creature obsession you've got.
Yes.
How do they get into the house?
Well, who knows, Judith? We've got these things called Marnie worms too, and we go downstairs.
Yes.
And they're like millipedes, and every night there is a good 3 or 4 in each room downstairs. And they're okay because you just have to tap them and they curl up into a little hard ball and you just pick them up and put them down the loo. But we don't know how they get in either. But this monster of a spider, how does it get in? The doors are open all the time, so it gets in any way it likes. But what I want to know is why they're so attracted to my vicinity. And I wasn't even thinking about it, so it wasn't even like it was law of attraction, do you know what I mean? Except we had been talking about it down at the taverna, hadn't we? We've been talking.
I wouldn't take it personally. I would think almost every house in the neighbourhood had a spider that night.
I know, but why did it come and march along the sofa towards me?
Maybe if we Googled, there would be something about attracted to heat, or who knows, I don't know.
Possibly anyway, so we got, luckily, I leapt up and shrieked my head off, obviously, and Sarah immediately sprang into action and bashed it with Code of the Extraordinary Mind. So Vishen Lakhani not only stimulates thought, but is a heavy weight enough book to, I'm afraid, remove said creature from the vicinity, but it's made a horrible stain on the back of the sofa cover. I know. So how's your week been, though?
It's been good. Some nice things have happened, as I hinted to last week. that time of year where I'm having all of my books. And my very favourite day of the year, Lee Child's Day, when we get the new Jack Reacher book, I've written in my diary as yesterday, Tuesday, and I cleared my day in order to read the book. And then Amazon downloaded it on Monday night, and I had to completely swap my Mondays and Tuesdays so that I could read my book on Monday instead of Tuesday, which was fun. And then a nice thing happened from a blog, which was an old school friend who once before commented on a blog I wrote about Butch Cassidy and left an email address in order to do that. And I emailed her back and it bounced back and I wasn't able to reach her. This week she used the contact form, which meant that I could email her back. Again, I haven't heard whether it's reached yet, but that knowing that my blog is bringing forth a friend who I was at boarding school with between 1966 and 1972, and who I was very close to for a couple of decades after that, but have lost touch with recently, is a really nice thing.
It is, yeah. I had a message once from someone who used to work with my mother back in the 60s after they'd read one of my newsletters, so that was quite interesting. It's all very well if it's someone you want to hear from and liked back in the day, isn't it?
Well, the good news is you don't. If somebody comments on your blog or writes to you via the contact form, there's no obligation to return either of those, is there?
No, I suppose not. No. So, yes.
But I do have a friend of my mother's on Facebook. I mean, my mother's been dead for 11 years, and this woman is in her 80s and very active on the social media. And she did send me a message saying, "Are you, so-and-so and so-and-so's daughter?" And I said, yes. And now we're Facebook friends, which is great.
Oh, that's marvellous. I love to hear about people of that age on Facebook.
So do I. And she's also writing her memoirs of what she remembers of the Second World War. So that's quite good fun as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone writing memoirs is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what's fueled your fire this week then?
Writing, bizarrely. NaNoWriMo, I'm up to 16,000 words. Last Friday I wrote 6,000. Yesterday, because I knew I couldn't do it today and because I'd had a couple of days off for reading the book, I had to write 6,800. Tomorrow I've got to write 4,500. With this blog thing I'm doing every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we now have show notes, which I then copy onto my blog, and I also write a Facebook note for us, newsletters. All it seems to do, I'm doing is writing, but I am loving it at the moment.
Tell everyone what NaNoWriMo, whatever it is.
It's called National Novel Writing Month, which is November every year, and they challenge writers to write 50,000 words in a month. And that's 1,667 words a day. And then I worked out I didn't want to do it on weekends, so I divided 50,000 words by the 22 weekdays there are, and now I have to do 2,250 a day. But it is doable, and what they recommend that you do if you're a writer or you've never written before or you think you might like to, is that you just write without editing yourself as you go. So that's the opposite that I would do for a blog post. In a blog post, I write it, edit it, tidy it up, press publish. This, just get the content out. So then put it aside until February and come back and edit it then. Now, I already know I'm never going to publish this. It's just something I'm writing for me, and it's cathartic. But nevertheless, it's had benefits, which I will share with you when I get to Word of the Week. And you can, if you want, sign up at NaNoWriMo, which is free, and then there's all sorts of global online and offline communities of people writing and encouraging each other to write.
Yeah. So you've decided you're never going to publish this?
I'm not going to publish this one, no, it's too personal.
And you're not even going to let someone have access to it after you die?
I'm probably going to delete it when I've finished. It's too personal.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, that's obviously your choice. It just seems a shame that after you're gone...
Some stories don't need telling to the public, Nicola.
I suppose I'd be writing... I've sort of started my memoirs, but I haven't really... I've got no further than about 20 emails worth, so I don't know how much that is, although my emails are quite long. I am drawn to this, I must say, but as I've committed to something else right now, I think it's not great timing for me, but it might be a distraction. But then, having said that, writing is cathartic. We talked about this last week, didn't we?
Yeah.
With how much better it makes you feel.
I have actually written and published on my blog and then taken off and made private again the first, the majority of the story of my life, and you've read it in the past. And the only thing that's missing there is the final chapter, and the final chapter is what I've been writing up in November. Not the final chapter, she's about to die, but the final chapter of that story.
Okay. So is there another story to be written? There's the business life of Judith Morgan.
No, I don't think so. I think when this chapter concludes, which could happen as soon as today, I'm going to go dark. My first thought when I wrote down a list of things was find somebody and pay them to do the podcast notes, because one of the things I'll want to do is stay off. I want to stop sitting so much in front of the computer.
Yes.
So my first thought was, since you pay for a lot of costs of the podcast, I would pay somebody to do the show notes. And I have somebody in mind that I'll discuss with you on another occasion because I'm not there yet. But the first thing I'm going to do when I have this breakthrough I'm anticipating is be offline 90% more than I am now.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I can understand that, because I am here much more drawn to get away from the computer.
Quite.
I actually walked 10,000 steps the other day.
Well, it's a much healthier choice physically, and I think we're at the stage of life where we've got to consider that.
We do have a bit of cash in the bank, and I haven't worked out how to spend it on ads yet, so we could experiment with some of that for the thing that I want to suggest, and also for this thing of getting someone else to write the show notes, because it's not...
Well, I wanted to... I thought what we might do, I sent you an email about project updates. I thought we might pick one interesting fact or figure about the podcast each week and just delve into it a little bit. But we'll get there when we get there. You tell me what's fueled your fire.
Well, what's fueled my fire is, I've been doing this Spirit Business course with Mike Hill and Kylie Slavic. It's growing on me. Good. We've done, module 1 didn't do it for me at all. Module 2 was okay. But in module 2, they recommended a book called Winning the Story Wars. And it's absolutely fascinating. I'll have to pop you over the author afterwards. But so there's two sort of things, really. It's about archetypes and the hero's journey. And I know you probably know more about the hero's journey than I do. I sort of was dimly aware of it, but what they're saying is, and I find the background of it quite interesting as well, in that archetypes were invented by Jung, who was a student of Freud, and he decided that Freud studied everyone that was sick, and so he had that view of people's psyches, and Jung split away and wanted to study people who were well, because he felt that, in order to get even better, you needed to study what was working rather than what was not working, which seems quite logical now. And so he invented these archetypes, which seem to have some sort of deep resonance in the human psyche. And it's interesting, because one of my favourite science fiction books of all time is called Plague of Angels by Sherry Tepper, and she's like a feminist sci-fi writer. And everyone in this book, it was set in a distant future after some horrible disaster had happened. And everyone, when they got to puberty, had to choose which archetype they were going to live as. And it was just an absolutely fascinating book. So I'm sort of vaguely aware of archetypes, but I've been doing a lot more studying of them this last week. And the point is that your marketing more deeply connects with people when you know what your archetype is, know what your brand archetype is, and know what your ideal client archetype is. And then you tell your story, your marketing story, as to appeal to your ideal client. And it's, as someone who has been flapping about the last few weeks, as you know, not knowing who my target market was, this is more deeply resonating with me, because it's stirring my passion for the people I want to help again. And it's telling me how I can tell my story and the story of what will happen to them if they come and work with me through the hero's journey and the archetype. And the hero's journey is something that obviously that crops up in all great stories. It crops up in all great films. It's probably in your Jack Reacher novels somewhere. But the minute you start, it's like typical, you start becoming aware of something. And the minute you're aware of something, you start seeing it everywhere.
Yeah.
And even in ads, I was watching an ad. What was that ad we were watching for the no, Sarah doesn't remember. We were watching an ad last night, and it was for a very highly masculine outdoor kit, for clothing. And it was a bit like that, there's brands for surfing and there's brands for rock climbing and, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it was so obviously geared towards the hero explorer archetype. It was just fascinating. So I really highly recommend this book. It's called Winning the Story Wars, and it's a rattling good read, and you'll start to notice things everywhere. And in fact, on the day that, we're not going into this too much detail, I imagine, but on the day when Trump becomes president, they were saying that he does so well because he tells such a powerful story and appeals to certain type of archetypes.
Now, let me ask you I'll ask you one question and then give you a tip, which I think you might find interesting. Have you worked out which is the archetype of your ideal client?
Well, I've actually emailed some of my favourite clients and asked them to go and take the Ferris-Mooney test, the first free bit of the test, and they're either coming out as a creator, in fact, overwhelmingly creator alchemists or innocent explorers.
So the creator alchemist is the same as you, so they're just like you. Yeah,
well, they're probably attracted to me because they think I can help them to do whatever they're doing better.
Yeah.
And the innocent explorer was a real surprise because... But when I think about those two clients, it's not such a surprise because they're very straightforward. They're very down to earth. They're very what you see is what you get. They create fantastic relationships with other people because other people instinctively trust them because there's no guile or deceit or even ambiguity. So yeah, it makes perfect sense, really.
And I turned out to be a sage.
Which I find you didn't sound like you were very impressed with that, but I
thought it was spot on, didn't you?
Yeah, totally.
And also, I know that's the second time I've taken the test. I can't remember what the answer was the first time, but I think if it had been a sage the first time, I would have remembered.
Yeah, you've probably changed, haven't you, over the last 5 years?
I think people do. I think that's the interesting thing, isn't it? But let me tell you my tip. It is Carl Jung who's behind coaching.
Is it really?
Yeah. Behind a lot of the stuff we were taught when we were learning to be coaches is Jungian.
Wow, I didn't know that at all. I thought it was...
Well, if you think about it, it makes success, doesn't it? Sense, because it's about success, what makes you healthy and whole, and not. I mean, the distinction has always been made. It's completely different from counselling, which is Freud and what's wrong with you.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. No, that's really interesting, isn't it? So yeah, this book's fueled my fire, and the whole thing about archetypes has fueled, and the hero's journey's fueled my fire too.
And we're going to talk more about archetypes next week, aren't we?
Yes, I think we should go into it in a bit more detail.
Okay, and you'll have to tell us what you're learning, because I don't really know very much about it, except that I'm a sage.
Would you like to hear about 18 proven ways to enjoy a successful location-independent business and the freedom to live wherever you like? Own It the Summit is a pack of 18 dynamite interview recordings with globally successful entrepreneurs, sharing their secrets of the real laptop lifestyle. We handpicked each of these people to interview to show you how to set yourself free to design your ideal lifestyle, whether working from home or travelling the world, while running a successful virtual business that you absolutely love. If you're bored sick of working for someone else, trading time for money, or of being a business owner living in one place, sick of the terrible weather and desperate to travel and have adventures, Own It the Summit is for you. These 18 global entrepreneurs share their stories. You can listen and enjoy their tales of where they started, how they founded and grew their businesses, the tools and techniques they use to work on the go, and what living and working in total virtual freedom really looks and feels like. By the time you've listened to these dynamite interviews, you'll be so inspired that you'll want to set up your own virtual business and be researching how to live and work on the go. But Judith and I pulled out all the stops to find people we both know to be living an exceptional life, running exceptional businesses. Participating in this summit was directly responsible for me deciding to up sticks and go and live in Greece, and Judith was already in preparation to go and live in the Caribbean. With that in mind, you can imagine we drilled down for the nitty-gritty answers to the questions you might have about living and working abroad. After the event, testimonials poured in, and everyone seemed to find something different in each speaker to really enjoy. Just one of the testimonials read, "I've never been online that long, 2 days in a row, my new record for studying online." That was Eve. Claire said it was great content. Her family was getting cross with her huddled in her study. So great to be reminded of all the supportive tools out there for digital nomads. Love your speakers. Just visit ownitthesummit.com and get your hands on these life-changing recordings today.
Which leads us into this week's Client Challenge of the Week, which you've brought. Hurrah!
Okay, so client challenge of the week then. It just popped into my head, and I think possibly because I've been through a little period of this, but I'm coming out the other side now. And it's what to do when you don't know what to do. And I've actually done some prep on this. You'll be astonished to hear.
Briefly, so have I, after you tipped me the wink about half an hour ago. Yeah, you go first.
Well, okay, so what to do when you don't know what to do? I think it depends whether you've got a deadline or not, because if you have got a deadline, you're going to have to take some action. And you taught me one of the best tools ever for what to do if you've got a deadline, you have to make a decision, is imagine that you've already made the decision one way or another and then sit with it and see how you feel physically. But if you don't have a deadline, you could just drift and drift and drift. And I mean, to be honest, out here, I could drift and drift and drift.
Yeah.
So the thing is to do nothing immediately and sit with it, and then try the following, because these are the things that have always worked for me, which is, but only try the following for a while. I think you've got to, if you haven't got external deadline, it's probably a good idea to impose a deadline on yourself.
Create one, yes, make one, yeah.
Even though they're not so good, obviously, those ones.
Oh, I don't know, actually.
I
You remember Marion's expression of an unbreakable promise to yourself? You know, you could decide that it is, although self-imposed, it is an unbreakable promise to yourself.
Well, as someone who's always struggled with self-discipline, I don't actually have any.
Okay, I've got it in spades, fortunately. Yeah.
I'm more likely to break a promise to myself than
Okay.
it has to be external for me.
Yeah. Shall I just tell you before you go on what my notes say? 1, nothing, sit with it for a bit. Which is exactly what you've just said. How funny.
Which, well, you know, but that is what you taught me, and you've taught me to be more less thrusting and.
Well, I think there's something that what I said after that was notice the tendency to fix things by doing, because there's a belief. You've got it slightly stronger than I have, but I have it strongly as well, which is nothing changes around here unless I do it, and also to alleviate feeling bad by doing something. And a therapist taught me that actually the healthier way is to feel the feelings, and honour the feelings, and that's the way they disappear. It's if you resist them, what you resist persists. Yes, there we go. So, you know, nothing, sit with it for a bit. Lovely, keep going, you go. Deadline self-imposed. Okay, ready?
So journaling, obviously, we've talked quite a lot in the last few weeks about how good journaling is, and how it's scientifically proved that it's good for you.
Yeah.
Because you can explore your deepest, darkest feelings in your journal, especially if you think nobody's ever going to read it.
Well, I suppose that's what I'm doing with my NaNoWriMo that I'm not publishing then.
Yes, exactly. You can just say the truth, can't you? I mean, that was tough. You know, that was one of the toughest things, was throwing away I've been journaling since January the 18th, 2011, pretty much every day. And throwing away all my old journals, because I didn't want to transport them to Greece, was tough, but I couldn't possibly have left them in any suitcases for anyone to stumble across.
I think once they're out, they're out. You know, might as well be burned or whatever. You know, all that matters is you get it out, not keep it in.
Well, Rich Shefford used to look back at his journals quite often when he was facing situations that were similar to ones he'd faced. Yes,
I have a client that does that, and, you know, good on Rich and good on my client, but I don't think you have to do it that way.
No. The next thing I've written down is seek positive input. Pick 3 people who have done what you want to do or have achieved what you would like to do. You don't know how to do.
Nice one. That's not on my list. Seek pos input. Yeah.
That can be in the form of reading or listening to their books, reading their books, listening to their podcasts. I'm a great believer in going and finding podcasts by people who have done what you want to achieve, even if you don't know how you're going to achieve it.
Yeah.
Also, the other thing it occurred to me, you can actually contact people very easily on social media nowadays. So if you have a guru that you like, you could just pop up on their Facebook page and ask them the blooming question, what would they do if they were you?
Yeah.
But there's also, I was reading about these things called WWJD bracelets, which is bracelets they were giving to lots of youngsters in America, and it was what would Jesus do? But they've now started, other people have started using it, so you can say, you know, what would Rich do?
Well, I thought WWJD, what would Judith do, was what I thought. You said Judith, Jesus, you know.
No, brand around here whatsoever.
No, right. What would Judith do? How funny.
Your clients, I mean, when you're a good coach, your clients say that they can hear your voice in their head.
Well, they do occasionally say things like, what would Judith do? It's very sweet, isn't it?
So there you go. You could just get some of those bracelets.
No, I'm sure I don't need to go that far, Nicola, but I'm loving the initials, WWJD. I might even ask myself that, because there's, one has a different sense of self as well, doesn't one?
Yeah, well, it does. And then the other thing is obviously to go to mentors. I mean, I'm thinking back, because we've both been through times when we didn't know what to do next. And I was thinking back to the times, and I went and had lunch with several of my mentors, and I asked for input, but I've written down here, but be ready to ignore it all, because getting other people's advice is great, but it's only the advice they're giving you that they would do themselves, and it might not be right for you, as some of my mentors' advice totally wasn't for me.
Yeah, which makes it a displacement activity, which is no bad thing. It's just something to do while you're waiting to work out what you're going to do.
Well, they might come up with some gems.
They might. I'm not against it. I'm just saying, if you're prepared to ignore it all, you're being busy in a useful way, actually, because it gets you out of the house and stops you, ruminating. Yeah.
Stops you ruminating. And then what I've got here is number 5. I thought I'd limit it to 5. Was after input, think output. Doing something is better than nothing. Tell the car parking analogy, which is where I was going to tell you about my first car ever, which was just after Phoebe was born, so it's about 20 years ago. Gold Nissan Micra, no power steering. Used to manage to get it into the smallest parking spaces in Kensington and Chelsea ever known to humanity, because once your car's moving, it's much easier to turn the wheel.
Yeah.
And that's the analogy I always think of in the doing something is better than nothing, because you can always correct your course, but it's harder to get the momentum going and get moving if you're stationary.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the self-imposed deadline would come in. Okay, so I've had long enough thinking about it and talking to everyone about it. I need to do something, even if I don't know what the right thing to do is yet.
Yes.
So looking back to the times when you've been in a place where you didn't know what to do.
Well, before we go there, I'm going to tell you my tips, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I did manage to snatch a moment between my SBBM call and this. So my first one is nothing, sit with it for a bit, and to notice the tendency to fix things by doing. So as you rightly said, and we're not going to discuss it today, the day we're recording this, is the day that Donald Trump's been voted in as the POTUS. And I felt a need to do something by doing, and I coincidentally saw a post from my local food bank that what they wanted was all sorts of foods that I don't consume: UHT milk, custard, tinned pudding, tinned fruit, bars of soap, and
mashed potato, wasn't it? I thought
my instant mash. Yeah. So I thought, all right, I'm going to go down to Tesco's, which is the collection point, and buy some of that and give it to them, because doing was going to make me feel better about my difficult feelings. Now, I've changed my mind since then. I've made a donation online, because I've realised in this context, I don't need to actually physically do anything to make myself feel better, except just decide not to get sucked up into any of that nonsense. 1. 2, Tut would say, all you can from where you are with what you have. And I'm going to give you an example of that, because what I'm journaling in NaNoWriMo is the hellish 6 years I'm just coming out of. And when I didn't know what to do in those hellish 6 years, I thought, well, what can I do that doesn't need any of the resources that I haven't got? And the only thing that I kept coming up with all the time was change what you consume, i.e. what you eat, what you drink, what you read, and what you watch. So change what you ingest. And that, at times, that seemed to me to be all I could do from where I was with what I had.
Tell us, for the listeners who don't know what Tut is.
It's the daily email that we've been getting for 15 years that everybody else is just catching on to. If you go to tut.com, you get an inspirational email at 9 o'clock every morning in UK time. I think it probably comes first thing in the morning wherever you are in the world. And it's amusing and uplifting, and it's Mike Dooley, who is quite well known now on the inspirational speaker circuit. But his thing is always that he's in the woo-woo space, he's in the manifestation and visualization and all that kind of thing. But he says, you still must do all you can from where you are with what you have. And that's borrowed from somebody like, I've forgotten his name now, a great tennis player. I'll remember his name later. And, that's all you can do, really. That's all you can ever do. All you can ever do, and you see these people say it on X Factor and the dancing, if you've done your best, even if you've done your best for today, that's all we can ask of you.
Yeah.
It might not be your best forever or your personal best, but everybody's always doing the best they can. If you can do what you can from where you are with what you have, that's a good one. Now, the third one is James Altucher's daily practice. I'll link to this again, the How to Be the Luckiest Man on the Planet. He says, and I think if I can minimise you, I've kept it open. He says you've got to go back to a daily practice, which is to do something physical, which is some form of exercise. There's your 10,000 steps, because oxygenating your body makes you feel better. Something emotional, which is cut down on the downers, get out of your life what makes you miserable, whether it's people or teleprograms or the newspapers or the news. Mental, and his is always write down ideas. And spiritual, for which he offers praying, meditating, gratitude, forgiveness, or studying some kind of master. And his says, my own experience is I can never achieve the 3 simple goals on a steady basis without doing the above practice on a daily basis. And he lists the number of times he's had to do it: 1991, 95, 97, 2002, 2006, 2008. And if I do it, he says, magic happens. Now, what he says is the results are within about a month. So you've got to do this for a month. I'd notice coincidences start to happen. I'd start to feel lucky and people would smile at me more. Within 3 months, the ideas would start really flowing to the point where I felt overwhelming urges to execute ideas. So there you go. See, it's quite a long time frame, because we want this problem we're discussing solved overnight. He's saying you've got to do this 4-point practice for a month or 3. Within 6 months, good ideas would start flowing. I'd begin executing them, and everyone around me would help me put everything together. Within a year, my life was always completely different. 100% upside down from the year before. More money, more luck, more health. And this is my favourite bit. And then I'd get lazy and stop doing it, and everything falls apart again. Which is what we all do. So, a daily practice, stick to it. And my fourth one, final one, short one, is inspired action. And inspired action is implement any idea, any divine nudge, however small. So you're in the shower, or you're driving the car, or you're walking down to Katerina's, and you have an idea, come back and implement it. So my food bank was a good idea. If I had an idea, I implemented it. If you get an intuitive nudge, follow through. And it could be tiny, and you think, well, this one tiny thing isn't going to make a difference, but it doesn't matter. It gets you back into doing.
Yeah, and as Steve Jobs and his dots, that tiny intuitive nudge might be a huge dot that is.
I totally agree, and often it is. It is, but it's always inspired. You have a little idea. You wake up. Sometimes I wake up from sleeping, wake up from a nap, wake up from overnight, and you wake up with a thought that's on the tip of your tongue. And you think, "Oh, I've got to go and do it." You've got to do that one. You can't just let it go and disregard it. You're getting an intuitive nudge to take some inspired action, however small. It's inspirational. It's you don't know where the idea came from. That's why it's inspired.
The one thing that I've taken away from my half-book reading of Big Magic from Elizabeth Gilbert and Dan Norris, who loved that book, talks about all the time, is the concept that ideas are roaming through the universe looking for a home, and that those intuitive nudges are a great idea knocking on your door to see if you're the one that's going to bring it into action.
I just posted a blog post on that very topic this morning. And can I just say, on that topic, Liz Gilbert's book called Big Magic was published 2 or 3 years after I started a group called Small Business Big Magic, which proves entirely the point.
I love your, just coming back to your intuitive nudge about the poor people who need the foods. I love the fact that your first instinct was to go to Tesco's physically and buy the stuff and then put it in the food banks at Tesco's, and then you improved it, as you always do, to be more efficient.
Well, you know what I did? I went to Tesco's website and I looked at all of those items and what I would buy and put in my trolley and heave over to the place where you donate them. And I added it up, and then it came to £15. So I rounded it up to 20, and I went on the website, I gave them 20 quid. And of course, having done that, because of gift aid, it gives them 25 quid.
Oh, okay. So it's even more efficient to do it online than it is to actually go and hoik the stuff over.
Well, maybe it is, because actually what might happen then is, they've got published on the website that these are the foods they most urgently need. And actually says, we don't need any more tea or pasta, thanks very much. But it may be that that's 3 months out of date. And the money I'm sending them today, they might need something, they might need nappies today or something. And then they've got the money to buy what they need now.
I was a little disturbed about the idea of instant mash. Surely that can't be good.
I'm not sure if I've ever eaten that in my life, but I'm just being too posh, really. If that's what if you're in a food bank, let's imagine that your living circumstances are not as optimum as yours and mine, and presumably boiling a kettle and pouring it on things and eating tinned pudding and fruit and custard is easier if you don't, say, have a kitchen or a full range of kitchen utensils, isn't it? Now, when I had a close friend in hospital recently, I said, what are you being given to eat? And there was a lot of talk of custard. And I said, it doesn't sound very good. And his wife pointed out to me that custard is good, actually, because it has an awful lot of things in it that one would tend to discount. But it's, if you make it yourself, it's got eggs and milk and sugar, but it's got quite a lot of stuff in it that you wouldn't think had any value at all, but does if a person's hungry or malnourished.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with tinned fruit. I loved a nice tinned peach back in the day.
Well, a cling peach, as they used to call them. I'm not altogether sure why. I mean, I barely eat anything out of a tin these days, but I'm just being too posh, really. And I do like a bit of shop-bought custard in a funny sort of a way, but a bar of soap isn't something I've had anywhere near me for a long time. I have soap in a different sort of format. The only thing I had on this list that I have in common with these people is toothpaste. But that's not the point, is it? I can imagine, God, let's hope we never get there. I can imagine the time when if I was hungry, I'd fall on all of those items, instant mash and custard to follow. Do you know what I mean?
Including, sausage and mash, one of the finest meals known to humanity.
Yeah.
Right, moving on.
Any more on this topic?
I think it's interesting, dear listeners, we never compare notes before these shows. In fact, some of us barely prepare, but that'll be me then. But life's got a lot easier since I'm 2 hours ahead of Judith. It's my only advantage over her, and I'm looking for what it's worth. It's
not your only advantage over me. Stop it, you silly girl.
But anyway, I get up earlier on a Wednesday and I have time to prepare. And so I think it's interesting that we've actually come up with very similar things, haven't we?
Mm-hmm. We have, yes.
And we never practice word of the week or anything, but I'm ready to lay a bit of cash, if I was a betting woman, that we're going to come up with a similar word today.
Okay, before we go there, I just wanted to say something about this, and I've forgotten what it is
now. Big wings.
Yeah, I've forgotten what it is now, but it might come back to me in a minute, about the thing about we came up with the same things, and then you came up with something in the middle that I didn't think about. I can't remember what it is. I suppose, I think what was my overwhelming thing about this. I think my first one is the most important, which is, what do you do when you don't know what to do? Initially, nothing.
I think that's a very important word, initially. Because people just get bogged down completely. And that's why I thought it would be good to come up with this topic, because, I've been feeling the urge to take action, but I haven't actually known what action to take. But I've been able to stave that off. What I didn't want to do was take the wrong action, because I sort of see this now as a reinvention for the rest of my life, and I don't want to take the wrong action or jump into things too quickly. And it's funny because I've been I nearly Skyped you this week because you are such a demon at thinking up new domain names. And I nearly Skyped you and said, look, I'm looking for a name for this thing. And I think I've come up with a name, but I don't want to go and book it. I don't want to get the domain name. I'm unaccustomed as I am to taking no action.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Yes, and that's because that's my point. Yeah, notice the tendency to fix things by doing. I think doing is appropriate in this business context, but I'm liking the idea of you being more thoughtful and not necessarily rushing into the fix. I don't think you can get things wrong, by the way, but I know what you mean by that.
So instead of getting a new domain name, setting up a new website and confusing everyone yet again, I think what I'm going to do is explore my archetype my client archetype and the new hero's journey version on my own blog and see if it resonates.
Okay.
Or put it into a category.
Yep.
That may or may not be called the thing that the domain name may or may not be called. I may or may not buy it just to secure it. But I'm not going to go rushing into a whole new brand too quickly. I want this new brand, if I do a new brand, or whether I just do it under my own name, to be, thought through and thoughtful and well designed. So yeah, most unlike me. So where is Nicola and what have you done with her?
I think sometimes to be unlike oneself is quite a good thing.
Yes. Yes, it could be a good thing, definitely.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with reinventing ourselves, is what I mean. And I think our marketplace will go with that. The people who don't like us reinventing ourselves tend to be our friends and family who like the convenience of us staying where we were.
Yeah, good point. So word of the week then, what is it?
Well, you've got to go first now, given that bet you were prepared to lay. Bring it on, come on.
Change.
No.
No? Okay. It goes contrary to what I've just been saying, really. And I can't read my notes because it suddenly got very dark. Hang on, let me just lean over to the kitchen. Why doing something is better than doing nothing long term? Oh, okay, so I'm directly... I must have written this at different times of the morning.
What does it say? Why doing something? Say it again.
So in the... Hang on. That's smudge talking. I can't read that at all. In the same way that doing something is better than doing nothing.
Okay.
So I don't know what I was trying to say there. Really, I think I was thinking of the whole Trump thing, and I was thinking, that people have voted for change, and I think that perhaps doing something is better than doing nothing in the long term, but doing nothing might be better in the short term. So you don't make change for change's sake. I think that's where I was going with that.
Just on the Trump thing for 1 second, and not about him at all. But I saw that in America they have a two-party system, as pretty much we do here as well. And I saw a very interesting woman on the television last night in the 3 seconds I gave to watching this before I went to sleep. And she said in America, only once since the Second World War, and that's a long time, that's more than my lifetime, it's about 70 years, only once has it not gone A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B. So whichever party was in, the other one gets in next time.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened. So if you have a left-leaning Obama, you're going to have a right-leaning Trump next.
And is it? Do you mean like every four? Because they do every 4 years, but then Obama got in for a second term, didn't he?
No. The second terms are, if we like you, we keep you. So what it's saying is every time you've got to change them after 8 years. So whether the person's there for 4 or 8, will go the other way next time. Yeah. So it's a bit like if we've had the Tories, then we'll have Labour. If we've had Labour, then we'll have the Tories. It's the same in America as well. Only more. We tend to change it less often than them. It just goes A, B, A, B, A, B in America, with one exception in the last 70 years.
Yeah. Have you been following what Michael and Kayla have been posting on Facebook?
A bit, yes, a bit. I try not to watch any of this stuff that upsets me, to be honest. But I've seen his viewpoint on the world. Yeah.
Well, I think that'll be an interesting one because what they were campaigning for was a third party to get someone, Johnson, I can't remember his name, to get enough votes so that next time a third party would get some government money to support the campaign.
Well, in America, their system is different from ours. What really counts is who runs the Senate. And that's already decided, and it made it hard for Obama to get anything done, and it's not going to make it any easier for Trump to get anything done. So in effect, the president can end up just being a sort of visual figurehead for televisual purposes.
Yeah. Talking about television and elections and political stuff, I've just started watching The Designated Survivor with Keith and Sutherland on Netflix. It's really interesting. It's about, there's a bomb attack on Capitol Hill when the State of the Union.
That's right, and he's just a sort of ordinary person, and he ends up being in charge, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's really, really good. I've watched three episodes now, and the next one comes on Thursday.
Did you used to watch 24?
I did watch 24 the first.
Because Kiefer Sutherland makes quite a good person to save the world, oddly.
He's got a lot older now, and they've toned him down quite dramatically. But there's a lot of mumbling. I have to have it on quite loud volume.
It's your age, darling. It's your age. Don't worry.
But no, I'm thoroughly enjoying it, especially having come fresh from all 8 episodes or whatever it was of The West Wing. I'm loving it. Okay, what was your word of the week then?
Well, before I get there, I remember the name of the tennis player I couldn't think of earlier. It's Arthur Ashe.
Oh, you're going back a bit.
Who died of AIDS, sadly. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
No, you did. Anyway, my word of the week is muse, M-U-S-E, because of all of this writing that I'm doing. And the concept that's attributed actually to the golfer is the harder I work, the luckier I get. But my version of this is the more I write, the easier it gets, because I started this Monday to Friday blogging thing back at the beginning of October. And then at some point, in addition to our show notes, which I write for us and for me, we decided to add in a Facebook note. So immediately after this, I go off and write 3 things. And then I decided to put NaNoWriMo on top of that. What happens is, just like any muscle, just like you walking your 10,000 steps or whatever it is, after a period of time, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it suddenly gets easier, and I can now just open up WordPress and write 4 blog posts on the trot if I want to.
That's astonishing, isn't it?
Yeah, and then what happens is the muse visits, but usually only after about 4 weeks. So it's all blood, sweat and tears up until that point. And she doesn't visit every day, the muse, and I can't rely on her, obviously. She's another part of me, but, the more I write, the more often she visits me.
I think perhaps your brain gets into a specific kind of groove where it's thinking about, because Sarah and I were talking about this as we sat in our favourite cafe. Yes, what's it called? Cafe Actaeon. We can't pronounce the name very well, but it's a very nice place. And we were sitting there and we were sort of saying about, writing blog posts every day, because it's something we both like to get back to. And perhaps your brain gets into a groove of seeing everyday things and projecting blog posts from them.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a little notebook that I write down everything that I use mostly to write down what my clients say, so that it helps my comprehension when they're talking to me, and so that I can use feedback their language to them. And sometimes I go back and I think, right, what did I learn from that client? What did I learn from that client? And a little nugget from each client will turn into a separate blog post.
Yeah, nice. Because James Schramko is doing a similar thing. He's coaching people individually within his membership site now, which is a real interesting development. And so he basically there was a section in the forum that was called "What One Thing," and you just had to put in there what one thing you were going to do this week. But he's made all of those bits private now, so he is now commenting, because he says a lot of people wouldn't use that because it was so public. They're now using it because it's private, and he's actually getting deep insights into trends of what clients are experiencing and struggling with. And then he takes those trends and turns them into an anonymized Uber thread, if you like. And then everyone piles in and they can share or not their own experiences if they want to. But yeah, interesting how you can start to extrapolate life lessons from everyday bits of life once you start looking.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, project updates then.
I thought we might delve into one podcast fact or figure, but you said you had something you wanted to discuss in this section or something. I don't know.
It was about the podcast, actually. It was this thing of Sarah's been doing lots of investigation into this whole thing of, can you get your podcast onto YouTube automatically from your podcast existing? And I think what she's discovered, because she's been experimenting with ours, is you can't do it unless you're using Libsyn as your actual podcast feed that then goes into iTunes.
I think that's what it said. So ours doesn't go to iTunes via Libsyn, or it does?
No, it doesn't. Because Pat Flynn advised otherwise. He said it's better to do use Libsyn for hosting because you get all stats, but then put your content on Libsyn as for publication only, not for syndication only.
So is it better? So should we experiment with changing for a while to see?
Yeah, I was going to look into
the YouTube thing.
He's going to look into it. I mean, otherwise, it's a question of me contacting Cyril and saying, you know, okay, so go back to the beginning and put this, whatever pictures on the blog post to the audio and turn it into a video and get it onto YouTube. So you know, that would be cheap.
I don't think we want to pay for that if we don't have to. I think we should see whether Pat Flynn was right or not and start doing it the other way and see what happens to all our stats.
That's a good reason he gave for doing it this way. The way
but things do change all of the time, and we didn't have the YouTube thing in mind then. So it may be that the YouTube thing swings it.
Well, I'll go back and look at his post and
okay.
See why he recommended against it. It was something along the lines of not putting all your eggs in one basket. And,
okay.
You know, the same way as, you know, James advises not to put all of your client interaction on a Facebook group in case they change the rules later.
Yes.
So
but there's ways around that, you see, which I just set up a Google group in case I ever need it.
Do you say a Google group?
I set up a Google group in case I ever need it.
I was going back into the mists of time Google groups.
Well, I don't need it, that's the point. We do in one of my groups, we use it for emailing on Monday mornings, our check-ins, but the other one, I've got them all lined up on there in case Facebook ever pull the rug.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'd quite like to ask Pat Flynn, if you go to Pat Flynn and look up that post, it'd be worth asking him if he would still give the same advice today in November 2016, because these things do change.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd ever get an answer from him. He's awfully big nowadays.
No, it might be worth trying. There might be a place, he might have a place somewhere where you can ask.
Yeah, well, he does, but whether he'll answer is another thing. Okay, so what should we discuss today then regarding
what's off the top of your head would be an interesting fact or figure or thing, anything about the podcast? I've written here, anything new / interesting.
That's why I didn't reply to your email, because I couldn't.
Well, there you go. But the point is, I did write a long list of things. I think we could, not today, because I've got a couple of things I want to tell you about in the next section, which might take me a bit of time. But we should pick one a week and keep this section short, because it's about us. And, you know, the listeners perhaps not as interested in us as we are in us, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, we're very interested in us.
Yeah.
There's no finer topic, in my opinion. Along with your instant, what's the word? Your imminent deification.
Well, from WWJD. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
That's the words this week. Go on then. Let's move on to the next section.
Yeah, I've got two in Who or What's Impressed. One of them, well, both of them actually have a business implication. The first one looks like it doesn't. Andy Murray is now the #1 tennis player in the world. And
about him earlier when we were talking.
That makes me very, very proud. But let me just tell you, it's taken him 11 and a half years to go from zero to hero. And I've written here, business is no different. Business is easier than what he's done. He's worked himself physically hard and done, I think, the best part of 800 matches against the stiffest competition in the world in order to end up #1. It's a massive, massive, massive achievement for a single human being. Okay, he has a big team, but it's just awesome. And I don't see it any different. I think 11 and a half years is what it can take if you want to achieve something of value.
Yeah, and the other thing I was thinking earlier on is how unlikely anyone would have said that was even perhaps 2 years ago.
Well, we didn't like him very much until he cried at Wimbledon, that's why.
So, yeah, people have to be able to connect, don't they? They say that about the X Factor. We haven't even mentioned the X Factor this week.
I can't remember who got knocked out. Some girls, didn't they?
What, the girl? Oh, okay.
The girl band went and we kept the weirdo from Bjorkland.
Yeah, I don't. She's got to go. Surely, she's very odd.
Well, the public don't like her, and the panel keeps saving her.
Who's voting for her then? That's the question.
I don't understand the voting patterns. Don't start me on the Great British Public and voting. Can I tell you my other one, or are you commenting on Andy Murray?
No, I've still got thoughts about Andy Murray. Yeah, nobody would have thought that was likely a couple of years ago. As you say, nobody really warmed to him until we started to get to know him. And then suddenly he's becoming a national treasure. But I do think it's absolutely admirable what you're saying, and what a huge so what happens with this whole getting voted the best in the world then? It's not about winning a particular tournament then, is it? Is it an aggregate of...
Well, because they play on this, they play a number of these certain tournaments a year, quite a lot of them. I mean, they do it all the time.
Yeah.
You've got to play against all of the same people all of the time in Paris and
they're playing for prize money, are they? Is that how they make their living?
Well, and points.
Okay.
You get points. So this year he won the Olympic gold medal. Their points don't count because that's not in the Masters tournament or whatever it's called. Now, I know that Sharon and Sue and people who listen to this know much more. It's points. Sharon. And you could say, if you were churlish, that because Federer and Nadal and various other people have been injured, he's had a chance to go ahead in the points. But actually that is churlish because he's winning these proper grown-up things more often than he used to. He often used to come second. And his main competitor is Djokovic, who he's just overtaken. But they've got 10 or 11,000 points each, and the nearest competitor to them has got half as many points, 5,000. So he's massively ahead of the other good people in the world.
Yeah, the rest of them.
And I see it all as hard work and self-belief where the rest of us didn't believe in him.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And as
yeah.
Said, that would be churlish because he has worked his arse off for 11 years.
That's right. And I don't want to, 11 and a half years. My clients want it to be about 11 and a half minutes.
Well,
I don't want to say that anything worth having takes 11 and a half years, but if you get better at something the more you put into it.
And they do say it's every overnight success takes 10 years.
Well, quite. Yeah. Should I give you my second one, or are you going to give me one of yours first?
Well, I'll give you mine, and then we'll end up with yours.
Okay.
Enough, it's another hard worker who's taken about 10 years to get there, although he looks like an overnight success, as they all do. I don't know if I've mentioned Casey Neistat before.
Yes, isn't he the man that made you want to buy a drone?
Yes, I still want one. And basically, he does drone comparisons, which are rather splendid. I was watching. He's done over 200. He was a filmmaker first, but I've been watching some of his earlier stuff and finding out a bit more about his backstory. And he moved to New York in when he was 20 odd, and he's now 40 odd. And he started to make films with his brother, and they started to get some critical acclaim. And then they were invited. They did a free thing for a friend of theirs, who then turned out to be one of the leading lights of the HBO channel when it launched. And so, as a result of having done this great free job for them, they were invited to do a literally no budget spared kind of series, and it was a raving success. And they sold that to HBO for a large sum of money, and then he sat back and didn't do anything for the next 3 years because he didn't know what he wanted to do next, interestingly enough. And then he started making YouTube videos just to get into the discipline, a bit like daily blogging, I suppose, and the discipline of making movies, because he just had lost the habit of making movies regularly. And then I watch him because I find him highly entertaining, but the more I learn about him, the more I like his work ethic. He's very keen on family. He's not the best looking bloke you've ever seen, but the more you watch him, the more attractive he gets because the more you get to know him. And he travels all around the world, and it's because he's uses drones and because he goes out skateboarding in every city he goes to, and he goes out running and he films it. You really get a fantastic sense of how amazing the world is. And the nicest thing is wherever he goes, he gets recognised, and kids particularly run up to him, and they're so excited to see him. And I've only ever, I suppose it's his own video, so he'd edit it out if he was nasty to anyone. But I do get the genuine sense that he's just genuinely nice to people. He makes himself late regularly by hanging out with kids who want to have selfies and things. So yeah, just really, really been impressed with him. He keeps me company when I wake up in the middle of the night for no discernible reason, except that these worms smell a bit. So last night I was infested with 3 or 4 of them. They were making horrible stinks. So I think that's what woke me up.
Stinky worms. I'm just going to make a comment there, which might be useful for some of our male listeners, perhaps. You said it, and I believe it. Men become more attractive the more you get to know them, the more you like what they talk about and think about and how they behave.
Yes, very much so. You could definitely fall in love with an ugly man if he had a great sense of humour.
Oh, it's his brain. It'll get me into bed every time. I always say the man's brain is his most attractive organ.
As long as it's not too inflated, obviously.
Well, obviously it doesn't appeal, the same organ doesn't appeal to everybody, does it, Nicola?
No, it's jolly good job it doesn't. Anyway, I never thought we'd be having this conversation on the podcast.
But it's an interesting point you make, and I was trying to sell it to a girlfriend the other day who's doing internet dating. She goes, "Oh, he's wonderful in every way, but there's no chemistry, or that it doesn't, he doesn't. I don't find him attractive." And I went, "Look, have you never found that thing where the more you get to know a man, and the nicer and the kinder and the more intelligent?" And he's a rocket scientist, this man, a proper rocket scientist. And no, she's not. I said, "Oh, for heaven's sake,
Well, I met my ex-husband through Time Out Lonely Hearts in the days when we had to actually write letters to each other.
Yeah, I remember.
And you often didn't bother enclosing a photograph. So you literally wrote to someone, then you had a conversation on the phone, and then you arranged to meet. It was all very terrifyingly immediate.
I think that men, the thing I'm talking about now, men either fancy you or they don't. But I think a man can grow on a woman.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Even when they shouldn't be.
Right, perhaps particularly so, but let's go there. Now, shall I tell you about my other impressive thing?
Yeah, go on then.
It's a programme on BBC iPlayer. Are you two able to watch iPlayer yet?
Yes, we are, but only until it gets dark, in which case the internet signal degrades horribly.
Oh, so you should be downloading then?
No, they won't let us do that because it detects our VPN. I need to have a conversation with you about this, but...
I never download, by the way, I always stream. But let me tell you about the programme. It's on BBC 4, which is probably a television channel you don't stray onto very much.
No.
And it's called Virago, Changing the World One Page at a Time. It's available until the end of the month. And it's about the publishing house, Virago Press, which this story exactly mirrors my life. I went to work as a teenager in 1973, and they started at about the same time. See all these black and white photographs of these women learning how to do P&Ls at the kitchen table. Interestingly, that she said, prior to that, pretty much the only women's fiction that you could buy was Jane Austen and the Bronte sisters. And they brought all of these brilliant female writers from around the world into our world. But what I like more about it was it almost, people are always asking me when they're interviewing you, and you asked me occasionally, what was it like when you started? Well, this programme shows you exactly what it was like when I started. It was in black and white, and men said horrible things about emerging women. And you see that, you couldn't borrow any money without a man guaranteeing it. They started at home at their kitchen table. They moved into offices in Wardour Street. They were bought out by a bigger publishing house, and then they bought themselves back. They had politics because they didn't all believe in either selling out or buying back. They had to get along with partners. It's still thriving today, and it's a serious publisher of women's writing. I could watch it again, and now just describing it to you like that, I could watch it again. It's changing the world one page. There's another story: 70s, 80s, 80s, and 90s, and noughties. 50 years of it's 50 years. It's a success story which built over 50 years.
And the hero's journey, indeed, with
yes, the heroine's journey, but yes, the hero inside all of us, man or woman. Yeah.
Well, I might have to. My daughter's showing signs of being interested in feminism, so I might have to send her a link to that. But
let me just tell you what it says here. Documentary telling the story of publishing house Virago Press. This is my favourite bit. Which dared to set itself apart to champion women's literature in an industry dominated in the 1970s by men. There are some really nice men in this programme who say fantastic things about them. It's lovely.
Ah, nice. Well, there I must leave you because it's now starting to thunder and lightning and I have to unplug the router.
Well, there I must leave you anyway because we're done.
We are done. And always enjoyable. Speak to you later.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah, bye for now.
You've been listening to Nicola Cairncross and Judith Morgan. The podcast is called Own It, Your Business and Your Life. Do come and visit us at ownitthepodcast.com. We'd love to hear your feedback. You can find out more about Judith and visit her on her website at judithmorgan.com, and you can find Nicola at nicolacairncross.com.